Welcome to Wisdom Within with Tina and Tonya. Stick with us with this episode because we are actually going to be talking about creating a sacred space, creating an altar, what that looks like, what you'd put on it, why you would want one. So, all things altars are going to be covered in this episode. So, before we get into that, though, if you are done conforming to others' expectations, you're done suppressing your wants and needs, and you're done feeling like life has no meaning, and you're ready to build a supportive relationship primarily with yourself, with your inner wisdom, and address resentments and disappointments that come from suppressing your wants and needs, and you're ready to transform your life from the inside out, then you're in the right place because we are going to teach you how to do this using practices that will support you mind, body, and spirit. So before we dive into creating a sacred space and all things altars, Tina, will you get us all cleaned up and ready to go?
Burning some
Possible.
burning some Palo Santo here, so it's kind of adding some good jujus there. Okay, see where I can sit this. Go ahead and close your eyes. Take a deep breath in. Another deep breath in. And imagine that you have a grounding cord, this cord that comes from out of the base of your spine and goes down through the floor and into Mother Earth. And with this cord, allow it to go clear, deep down to the center of the earth where you'll see this ball of light at the center of the earth, and allow that cord to attach to this ball of light. And now, as we're connected, the center of the earth, pull back any energies that you've sent out recently that need to come back. Just call those back. I see them as little puzzle pieces coming back into our energy field. Now, as we're connected with that white light at the center of Mother Earth, allow that light to come up, that grounding cord, move up into the base of your spine, up into your heart space. Allow that to fill up your heart space, down to your legs and your feet, and allow it to go up to your neck, your shoulders, down your arms, up into your head, and overflow out the crown. So overflows, that's clearing your aura. Just allow that to clean up your aura as it overflows. If you have any irritations or frustrations, just allow those to go down that grounding cord into Mother Earth. As your aura is getting scrubbed clean. Now go ahead and take another deep breath in. And go ahead and open your eyes.
Thank you. Oh,
Feeling more grounded?
I do. I do. Grounding and I are friends. I love that vibe of just that. It's almost like not a heavy energy, but like a solid,
Solid.
it just feels
Yeah.
comfortable. I don't know. I love that. I love it.
Yeah. I know I've really been paying attention to that lately, how I feel when I'm getting grounded or when I'm like, especially when we do these, because you and I will sit and chat for a while before we do these videos. And I notice how I'm up here a little bit. And when I pull that energy back in, it's just like whoop,
Hmm.
and you're solid and you're back in your body basically. And so
Just
it's
in
been
that.
interesting.
And it's less flighty, less scattery, more
Yep, right here.
energies here.
Yep.
So cool. I love it.
Yeah.
Love that practice. And we did a whole episode on grounding already. So if people are curious about that, you can check a couple videos below. If I remember, I'll
Right.
put the link in it or it's in the description down below and go learn more about really cool and several different ways of grounding. There's a lot of ways to do it. So you can learn all
Mhm.
about that in another one because today we're going to cover creating a sacred space, creating an altar, why you'd want to do that. Should we start with the sacred space in general? Or should we start? I think that would kind of be like, let's talk about why you would want to do that. What is
Mhm.
important about creating a sacred space? Where do you do it? That kind of stuff.
Right.
So, where does that fit for you?
For me, creating, so I guess that's twofold. When I'm out doing energy work, or, if I'm working in an office, or if I'm working at the place where I do my circles, I always want to create this sacred space for that type of work. And no matter where, it's like if I do a drum making workshop or whatever, I want to come in and create a sacred space there. But then I also have my home, which is my sacred space. It's my it's my place. It's
Mhm.
the place that I want to be. And so in creating those sacred spaces, though, it's all intention. It's being very intentional in how you do it, and what it looks like, to you, how you want it to feel, how you want it to, what intentions you're holding during these, if you're doing events, during these events, what's the intention? Or when you're home, what is that intention? For me, it's peace. I just want my peaceful little sanctuary here, and that's what I try to bring in.
Mhm.
Is that I'm feeling kind of still like I'm like not quite
Not
all
quite
the way
there.
here. Yeah.
I think for me, and I think you hit it right exactly. It's the intention, right? Because
Mhm,
and so my home is very much a sacred space. My entire home is almost like an altar, but it's very
mhm,
much my sacred space. And but it didn't start out that way. I wasn't setting out to create a sacred space. It wasn't until I learned more about energy that I really started to recognize the way I feel about my home. It has shifted over time and it now feels very safe, very sacred. It's my whole house feels that way.
mhm,
But my original intention was uh just to show up differently in my home and to create a different energy in my home because I was in a time where I had a really stressful job and we dealt with a lot of really tough stuff. And when I would come home, I didn't want to be bringing it with me, but I was kind of walking in the door like, "Hey guys, my kids are home." And I was just like, I'm fine. I'm just going to need a minute." Like I could feel myself being like I wanted to bark at them a little bit. I was kind of short-tempered, short-fused. And I was like, if I'm kind of ornery, it has nothing to do with you. You haven't done anything wrong. So I was kind of trying to like let them know that I've had a crap day. I'm feeling it. You haven't done anything wrong. This isn't you, which had a really good intention, but I was still bringing that vibe in my house, right? I was bringing that low energy, toxic, and really still kind of creating a space where my kids knew they were going to have to walk on eggshells, even though they weren't in trouble. But you know what I mean? Like that's what I was
mhm.
creating. And
Yeah.
so it came to me one day, one of those aha moments where I realized that's what I was doing. And I was like, oh, I am not doing this. I am not doing this. And so from then on, before I walked in the door, I would check myself, where am I? Because my kids are not my work and they don't need to carry that burden. And I shifted it so that when I would walk in the door, it was, hey, hi, I'm home. How is everybody? How are things going? And it was not a faking it. That was how I wanted to show up. And it was an intention to shift before I walked in the door of the house. And it completely changed the atmosphere in my home and has continued to remain that way. That was my beginning step to creating a sacred space, even though I had no idea that's what I was doing. So it's definitely shifted over time. But I think that wherever we are in that path, we can start by, how do you want to be there? How do you want to show up? What do you want the environment to be like? What do you want to bring? Because whether we like it or not, we very much set the stage in our
Right.
home. And I used to hear that phrase of, if mom's not happy, nobody's happy. And I was like, well, why does it have to be on my shoulders? That's dumb. What about if everybody else isn't happy? But like it or not, that we have a lot of influence within our own home.
Right. Yeah, I don't remember ever like a moment when when it shifted. I think it was just when we moved into this place, I don't feel like any other home that I've had has been as sacred as this place, um, because I was very much not in the mindset that I am now. And so when we moved into this house, it felt when we first moved into this it's a little tiny house and it's like, and when we first moved in, it just felt that it was that sacred, peaceful place, right? And it was like, and the land, we have 6 acres here and it all just feels like it's just that, you know, peaceful, sacred sanctuary type of a space that I, you know, I wanted to, at one point, I wanted to share with everybody. And now it's kind of like, I want to just take it back and just be all mine?
I'm like, nope, there is no such thing as entertaining anymore. It's my place.
Yeah, it's mine.
So, because you've had multiple places where you've lived, and I have too, um, what's the difference in the vibe of, like, you walked in, you felt that. What did you feel, for people who are kind of curious? Like, is there anything that you noticed that you could describe?
Yeah, and I mean, just in my previous um house, if the difference between the previous house and this house is like total, there was so much anxiety and so much. I also worked at a stressful job at that time, and so I was like always bringing my work home. Half the time I was on call 24/7. So it was like I always had my work home, always had, there was no, I did have a little art room that was kind of like my sanctuary, but didn't I didn't really intentionally create it as I would now. But it was kind of my sanctuary. But the house was like there was always that little bit of anxiety at all the time, and just always that I don't know, it was like it just wasn't as peaceful. Like
Hmm.
right now it's just like you come into my house and it's just peaceful and quiet, and you know the dogs and the cats are just happy to be here. So
Yeah.
and most people that come into my house do say that too. They're just like, wow, this place is, there's, I get many comments on when they come on the property or come on they just are like, wow, this is a peaceful place. So,
Mhm. Well, and I love that, because we'll take two different perspectives. Like, you've seen the difference in, like, that home. Your home has that feel.
Mhm.
So if people are like, well, my home doesn't, okay, cool. You can shift that because my home had, like, I knew that was where I was meant to be. But through my own journey, I mean, there was a time where the neighbors had nicknamed my house Little Vegas. And it was a party house. I mean, not on the weeks when my kids were with me, but when they were with their dad, I mean, it was the party house, and we had a lot of fun in my little house. And so even if it doesn't feel like that peaceful spiritual place that it does now, just know that you can create that if you want. That's the time in my life, that's what I wanted. I was starving for fun. I was starving for people, for friendships, for all that. And so it was very much a house of entertaining. We had so much fun and barbecues and all kinds of fun stuff. And it very much had earned its nickname. It was like the party house on the block. It was really fun. But that was a different time in my life. And then as I progressed, the energy in the home shifted with me. So for those who are listening, if you're like, well, my house is in the anxiety spot, like what Tina just described,
Mhm.
okay, cool. Just know that that's where it is, and then start intentionally creating things differently. Because I would bet that if you were still living in that other house, you could have created a different vibe.
Yeah.
Um, just to be able to let people know that wherever you are, and no matter what the situation is or circumstance is, it can shift. I do, however, I think the importance of creating the safe space, the sacred space, is to have that safe space for healing. And
Mhm.
that's what I feel very much in my home. And I feel like it's always been that way. I feel like there's been a very non-judgmental energy in my house. Um, that's allowed me to go through all of my different hot mess and shit show phases to where I am now. And it is a space for healing now. That's
Mhm.
the journey that I'm on. That's the space that I'm in. And
Mhm.
it's like a warm hug. It's like a blanket. And I feel that through my whole house. Um, but it doesn't have to be your whole home either. So if you live with others who, um, that's not their thing, or you don't want to decorate your whole house like I do, or whatever, it can be a little space. It can
Mhm.
be a small area. It doesn't have to be the entire house. That's just how it's worked out for me. And it sounds like you as well.
Yeah, 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 definitely. And but it can, I mean, like I said, in my other house, I had my little art room, and that's where I went to kind of decompress and do the things that I loved because, at that time I was doing art journaling, and I was that was my healing space because with the art journaling, what it did was it helped me to, because I am one who kind of censors myself in my journals. And so um, I was able to write down rage on the page and then paint over something pretty. And so that was it was very much healing for me to have that little room. Um, but it wasn't as peaceful as this space is now. But, I did have a little. And so, yeah, you can create your own little sanctuary, whether it be your bedroom or like what I had, a little art space or, whatever, you can create that and, let it be that healing space or that space that allows you to have your time, your self-care time or whatever.
Mhm.
And also when we're creating safe space in the energy world, I mean, like, you and I are both energy workers. It's a different, it is that there is a different, probably way of doing it, where uh, we're clearing space, we're putting major intention into it for healing for whoever's involved, in the group or whatever. And it is a different way of doing it, but each time I do an event, that's one thing that I definitely create, or even like, energy sessions or whatever. And I know you do that too. It's like creating that sacred space for that healing to happen.
Mhm. And I think that what I love about that is no matter where you are, you can create that sacred space. So I happen to be in my office. This is where I do my Reiki sessions, the in person. This is where I do my in person coaching. So I very much have a sacred space here. But just because this is already kind of earmarked as my sacred space, I still set that sacred space prior to everyone that comes in my door for this.
Mhm.
So even though I kind of have it all set up in the way that I like, I'm still building that energy, setting that intention, cleansing it from the person who just left and opening it up for the person who's here to come, closing that space, opening this space. It's very intentional. I have my little mental practices and things that I do for that. But if I were going to take all of this and go to the park, okay, I probably wouldn't go to the park, but somewhere out in nature, I would love
Right.
to do. When we find that field and we do that with the horses, like that,
Yes.
then it's just taking that and creating a sacred space in that space. So
Mhm.
really, you know, you can be anywhere and create a sacred
A sacred
space
place.
for
Yeah.
yourself or for others. Um, not just a safe not just a space of protection, which you can absolutely do, but you can set that intention of, whatever it is that you're wanting to bring into that space, and it can literally be anywhere you go.
Right. I have a good example of that. So I do drum making workshops, and so I teach people how to make their own sacred drum. So when I do these, I'm always very intentional with opening the sacred space because to me the drum is very sacred. And I had somebody who asked me to come and do a drum making workshop out in the Salt Lake Valley. Well, it was in Sandy. And I had no idea what I was walking into, had no idea what I was going to be doing, but I'm like, cool, I'll be there, I'll do it. And so I get there and it's in a realtor's office and we're doing it in a boardroom. And I'm like, okay,
There's a
this is
difference.
new.
This is an all business negotiation
Yeah.
vibe.
And so, yeah, it was definitely something different, but I was able to set that, say, that space. We did it in the boardroom on the table. But I was able to set a sacred space, and the person that asked me to do, and everybody that was there were very spiritual people, and they were in shaman training and whatever, and so all those tools were, or those drums were going to be used for healing purposes. So I think there's a different feel when we're doing working with those type of people anyway, but um we were able to set that sacred space even in this um you know, business office where
Mhm.
normally I do them in, somebody's metaphysical business, if it's a business, or in somebody's office that is, an energy worker or whatever. So that one was an interesting one for me, but that is a definite just description of being able to do it anywhere. We can set up the sacred space anywhere. And I've been to drum circle that was at a public park, and they were able to set up that sacred space at the public park. So they created that certain space right there for the circle. So
So, when you are setting a sacred space and just for ideas for people, what are some of the practices? Do you have items that you take? Is it prayers that you do? What is it that you do to set a sacred space?
I have sometimes, well, all the time now. Used to be it was sometimes, but now it's all the time. I create a little altar. Um, so when I go into the space, the first thing I do is smudge the space, and I do the clearing with sage, or if I can't do sage, because some places won't allow you to use sage, I use a selenite wand and go through and just kind of clear with selenite, um, or a spray. like your bitch
Like
begone
my
spray
bitch
or
be
my,
gone spray.
yeah. I have a Palo Santo sage mix that I'll go through and I'll spray. And so um I'll start with that. That's where I start. And then I do some prayers and I do drumming to the four directions, and I call in my guides and the each direction, the benevolent beings of each direction. I call them in to help me with this or whatever. And so and well, the seven directions, I guess. So it's above, below, and then I go within for a minute. And so that's I create that, and then I set a little altar which helps me to really get into the space and to helping me to set that sacred space. So I have whatever. Sometimes I don't even, I just grab things from the house. It's like, oh, you want to come, I'll have crystals. I have pine cones from nature. I have, just different things that will sometimes my little bear wants to come, just different things I'll put on the altar. And then sometimes, depending on what it is, if it's the circle, if it's our drum circle, then a lot of times I ask people to bring things and we'll set that space together with the altar. Um, and if it's not, if it's my drum making workshops, then I'm doing the altar on my own. So
Mhm.
I always try to make sure with an altar that I have something for each that represents each element. So you want fire, water, earth, and wind, or air. And so I try to bring something that represents each one of those and make sure that's on the altar. Some people want to make sure that they're in the right direction, with but I'm my intention is that they're on there, and I don't know my directions good enough to
I was just gonna say I'm directionally challenged, so that's never gonna happen.
right.
Like, I have them represented. That's as good as it's gonna
Exactly,
be.
that's where I'm at.
Yep, I love that. So when just as you were talking, I was thinking about, really the items that you bring, and I love that you brought up so many different ideas because it's really like each, and I've been to a lot of your events, and so each time you set an altar or you create that sacred space, it's slightly different. So it can be the exact same thing every time, but it can also just be, here's the things that wanted to come with me today, or here's the way I want to set it up today, or and you're using your creativity, which in and of itself is a form of that sacred, setting that sacred space is bringing that touch of you, that creativity that you bring to literally the table in that
Mhm.
situation. um so yeah, I thought that was really cool, just hearing that, just kind of like letting people know that you can have it very structured, where you have the four directions and the four elements, and you have them each in their own space, and they can come with you every single time and be it that way every time, or you can choose something different, and it really isn't right or wrong one way or another. And
Right.
I love that because there's been other times when I've heard other teachers say it has to be this way, and I'm like, okay, I'll try it your way and then I'll make it my own because
Mhm.
that's how I roll. And so anytime there's something that's so rigid, there's some shadow work to be done with that. So I'm always, I love it when it's like, let's have it, let's create it because we love what it does for the space itself, but let's let it be in flow based
Mhm.
on the nature of the event or the topic or the theme or whatever, too.
Right. Right. That's how I feel. I mean, I think we talked about that in one of our videos too, about these rituals and how we need to make them our own. And it's like any altar that we create, it's going to be um based on what we're feeling at the time, right? It's like, so if you're creating an altar for, say, your ancestors, you're going to bring in what reminds you of your ancestors. So you always make it your own, and you always make it. And like I said, I'm directionally challenged, so it's like I know I have the intention of putting those things on my altar, but I if my altar's sitting in here, I know which way east is, and I drum to the four directions every day. Well, not every day, but I quite often here in my own little space. So I know, when I get to some new place, um, even at the place I do drum circle all the time, I'm still trying to remember, okay, which way is east, and so I just have learned to just kind of be like, okay, this is my intention, and this is the intention of having it this way. I know I have all of these pieces on here, and um, I don't have them, right where somebody tells me they should be, but it's my altar.
Yep, that's what I was thinking.
It's
It's
the
my
way I
altar.
do
Don't tell me, I'll do it my way.
it.
So we keep using this phrase altar, and I know that was one of the things we wanted to talk about. So, what's the difference between creating a sacred space and creating an altar? For you?
So for me, an altar is like hmm, it's another little sacred space, but for me, it's a smaller space, and it's I'm trying to think of the wording, but it's a, so if you look it up on Google, it's a religious spot for creating ritual basically, or having, you can set up your rituals there. Um, so for me, it's a space of, like, if I'm working for my ancestors, it's a little space where I create a place where I can do little rituals related to my ancestors, right?
Mm.
So I'll put in, like, for me, I put in like a candle for sure because of the fire element, and then I'll a little bit of water, and a feather or whatever. But then I'll add, for the ancestors, add like, I have a Mexican coin that I put on there, or I have different at some points I'll put pictures. I have put, like, I had pictures of my mom and dad at one point on my altar, my ancestor altar. Um, just things that help you, to remind you of them. And then there's this ritual of going to this altar on a regular basis. Like, I have an altar outside right now that's my ancestor altar. Every day, it, when I'm home, I go out and I offer a cup of coffee every morning. And that's just a little ritual that I do to connect with the ancestors, to thank them or whatever. Sometimes I offer food. And so it's that little space that I use to remind me of connecting with the ancestors. And I'll put little sacred objects on there. So, like, right now, it's a small little altar, and all I have is like a deer horn, and I have a candle on there, which I will never light because it's underneath a tree. But the candle represents fire. I have water on there. I have a piece of incense for air, and I think I have a feather. No, I don't have a feather because I have the incense. And then I have crystals on there for earth. And so, it's just very simple and but that's where I put my coffee for, the ancestors in the morning, and like that. So that's kind of, one way. I have one that's back here behind me. That's my, um, where I'm working with my, um, kids. So it's more of the, working with ancestral patterns, not trauma, ancestral patterns. So I'm trying to, so in the mornings, many times, and I don't do it every day, but many times I'll come in here, I'll light a candle, say a little prayer for all my, my family, my girls and everything, and trying to help us to release those ancestral patterns. And so I have pictures of my girls on there. I have some crystals and a, candle, and then the air, water, fire things on there. So yeah, and sometimes I'll do one in my living room that's a bigger one. In the fall, I love doing them because I can find, cool,
Pretty
pretty
colors.
leaves and outdoor stuff, and it just turns out so pretty, and it looks cool out, in my living room. And so that's just a little sacred space where I'll just put in in the summertime, I haven't been putting it up like I would normally,
Mhm.
but because, and of course, I have the one outside too. So,
Outside.
so did that kind of explain? I don't even know
Yeah,
if I really
you
explained
did. You totally did.
it.
Well, and what I kind of heard with that would be the sacred space is the space in general, and then the altar is like a point of focus and ritual. And so
Mhm,
focusing your intention, having it, um, which sometimes I feel, I mean, like I'm even thinking about my body as an altar, I mean, I'm wearing the crystals. I have my little high priestess tarot necklace. Like I've got a lot of the things that I would have on my altar I wear throughout the day, and they're specifically chosen and they're not, they're more intuitively chosen than intentional for me, but that could even be an altar. You can put an altar in your car, you can have an item. So, but really what I think of with an altar is it's a smaller space for focus of intention and ritual.
mhm,
And and for me, like, it's probably one of my favorite places at my house. I do have my space here where I do the work. This is more of a sacred space than the altar for me. My altar is at home, and I have a table, and I do work from home. So I also have my laptop and all that stuff, but I have a little section in the corner where I've got a stand, and on the stand, kind of like what you're describing, I have incense. So I've got the
mhm.
air, I have tons of crystals, and I'll even put some pine cones and stuff. If I can gather things from outside, I'll have that for earth. Um, I have a beautiful crystal. It's a green onyx chalice that I have representing the water. Looks
Mhm.
like the cups in the tarot suit, of course. And so I have that, and then I have candles for the fire as well. And quite often when I do rituals, I will light the candle, or I will light a specific candle and let it burn as I'm journaling or doing whatever. But then I will also, just like what you're describing, I will have little areas of focus that I will have on there. So typically each full moon, I do a full moon card pull. So I have 3 cards that stay up there throughout the month or throughout that lunar cycle until the next full moon. So that gives me some intention, reminding myself this is the energy for me for the next 28 days ish. Um, so I always have cards on there. And then I will have little items like what you were describing. But a lot of times for me, it's uh, so it can be work with the ancestors. We've been doing ancestral work, the two of
Mhm.
us, and so I have an item of my grandma's up there, and it's not just for her, it's really representing ancestors in general. So I have that. But then I also have been learning, and if I have things come into my field, whether I'm choosing to learn it, or whether I have synchronicities and I'm like, okay, noted, I need to learn about this, then I will have some of those items on there as well. For me, it was about a year ago when crow started coming up, and I mean,
Mhm.
it was everywhere I turned, and it wasn't just them flying, it was them yelling at me. Like, there was some serious, they were talking to me. They were creeping on the building next door, looking in through my window, like, they were everywhere. And then they were coming up in pictures and cards, and I'm like, "Okay, I am receiving the message that I need to
Mhm.
follow this." And so I start doing some deep diving and learning more about crows and ravens in general. And I find in the Celtic history, their ancient history, they have a goddess, the Morrigan, and she's quite often represented by the crows. And when I start diving into that, I start finding that she was such a beautiful force, and just the different ways to look at that energy. And so that was part of my binging, was really learning about that. So I have a crow picture there. I even have a little black onyx crow that sits on there, just really representing that and letting me kind of tap back into that energy. And the fierceness of this warrior goddess as well as the healer that she had within her. So like I get to just every time I see that, it reminds me of that. And then just a couple of weeks ago or a month ago with a lot of the witch wound healing and that work that I've been working on, there's Hecate is really big in that, and she is a Greek goddess. She goes clear back to the Titans. Like I've learned so much about her, and it's been so because I love to binge learn that stuff. And so as I learn that, I will put little symbolisms of those people that I'm researching and learning about, the goddesses, the whatever it is that I'm focusing on. And each time I see those, it kind of just draws my attention and focus back into that space. Um, and I have so much fun with it. It's a for me, it's an energy and it's a connection to the things that I'm learning. And I don't know, it's a vibe. I don't even know how to describe it other than it is just an energy and a feeling with having that there in a place where I can see it on a routine
Yeah,
basis.
I love that. That is so cool. That's fun. And it's fun, you
Hmm.
know. So, when I started first learning about altars, they talked a lot about, making these little spaces where, and like if you have a meditation space, you can go and sit in front of the altar and meditate in front of the altar, And that's kind of, I mean, similar to what you're doing with yours. So you have those little pieces that bring you back to that focus, right? And that's what they talked a lot about using the altar for as a meditation space. I don't have what I do with in here is I do meditation in here, and so I'll light my candles around, But in the one in my living room, I'm not gonna sit on my knees and meditate, So it's like, and the one outside, either I just go out and visit with the ancestors or whatever. But they use it as that's a good way to use your altar too, is as a little meditation space. And then like even when if you're creating one for the full moon, say, and you're bringing in that energy of the full moon, it is a good time to set that altar up and then meditate with it and just kind of understand what the energy is and what it's bringing in for you or whatever, and so that's another um way to use the altar, and it's just it's just that extra focus point basically to help you to create those intentions.
It is. And I think, and that when you brought up, just talking about the moon, mine is basically redone every full moon because I
Hmm.
take all the crystals off and take them out to charge under the full moon. So when I come back, they don't all go in the same place. They can,
Hmm.
you do you. If you want it all the same, keep it the same. But I like to move things around and shift the energy a little bit. And so it doesn't look the same month by month. Now, sometimes it does. If there's a full moon where I'm not feeling it or I don't want to shift anything and I'm complete with where it is, it can stay. But the thing I love about that is it requires me to take a look at what I'm putting back on there. Is this something that I want to keep focusing on, or do I feel like this is complete for now? And then so it just keeps it very fresh. I mean, a month is not, my whole house doesn't get redecorated in a month, but the
Right.
altar does, and
Hmm.
so it just kind of gives me a little bit more of that freshness. And so, because you know how when things sit in the same place for so long, you don't even notice them anymore. And I don't want that to happen with that altar. So I love just being able to shift it up. There are things that's just where they live. I've got a few things that just live on it, but it can shift. It can go from up above to down below, or maybe it's to the side or whatever, and just kind of change it up a little bit. Um, so I think that's fun. And I love the when you were talking about meditating and just meditating to that altar, and then even talking about the definition, it can be religious, but it doesn't have to be. And I think that's important because the religion piece doesn't resonate with me. And even though
Hmm.
I'm learning about the goddesses, it's because that's a fascination that I have. And it's very different for me. But then I also think of things that like the gene keys, and the gene keys is not any way, shape, or form a religion, but it's very much a contemplation. So you could put a gene key that you're sitting with and put items on this altar that would remind you of that key and what you're learning, and really allow yourself to do a lot of contemplation or meditation around that as well. So you can make it as woo or as witchy or as calm and mellow as you want, and just really what is it that you need to bring in, and
Right.
what do you want to focus on, what do you want to feel, what do you want to build.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we first started working with art, because I think we started about the same time working with the ancestors, and I created this altar outside for my ancestors. And when it started, it was just this simple little one. But then I realized that I needed to add a picture of my mom and my dad on here. And so I added a picture of my mom, and who I have never had a good relationship. And, she passed away last year. And my dad, we had a complicated relationship. So it was like, I knew that I needed to put them on there, because at first I resisted. I didn't want to put any pictures, nothing on there. But for some reason, it was like, okay, I need to have them on there, and I know when this will be complete. I will know when this is complete. So I put them on there, put pictures of mom. I put my dad's driver's license on there and a picture of my mom. I had a belt buckle of my dad's and a feather that I had beaded of my dad for my dad. And then I had a pair of earrings my mom had beaded that I put on there. And I had put selenite on hers, holding her picture down, and then the belt buckle and stuff held dad's stuff down. And as I would go out and take coffee every day, it's the relationship with both of them started shifting a little bit with me. It was like those feelings of anger kind of started going away, and I started having a more, it just, it wasn't, I started healing is what it was. I was healing those parts that, we had, because like I said, my mom and I did not have a good relationship. And so I noticed a shift, and I was doing it every day, going out and dropping coffee off and just seeing them. It was always just, spending a little bit of time there, straightening up the altar and cleaning it up a little bit, and, dropping coffee off in the mornings. And then one day I had, my picture of my mom was gone, and I was like, what the hell? And I went looking for it, and I couldn't find it. And I knew that it was time to release her. And I finally found the picture, and it was in a place where I wouldn't have thought the wind would have blown it. And it was a big piece of selenite was sitting on top of that picture. So it had to have been moved. And so I knew that it was time. And so I took that picture and I took the earrings, and Joe and I did, and we took it out to, I have a medicine wheel on my property, and we took it to the west spoke of the medicine wheel, which represents the ancestors and, setting sun and um, the elders. And so we dug a hole and we buried it there. And the very next day, I walked out and my dad's stuff had been moved. And I was like, okay, it's done. And we did the same thing with dad's, And so that for me was a very profound experience in working with the altar, because I work with it. Like I said, I work with the kids, my kids here, and, in the house and whatever. But when that happened, I was like, oh yeah. And so I love that we can work um, in healing ways, with those types of things. And that's what the altar brings to me, is that little bit of ritual, and that, brought me some healing.
Mhm,
Definitely brought a lot of healing. And
mhm,
now it's my connection with the ancestors. And I was telling Joe the other day, I was like, well, in the wintertime, I'm not going to be able to make it out to my little altar. And he's like, well, we're just going to have to move it up front, And I'm like, yeah, we'll just put it underneath this tree that's right here by the house. And so it's just, that connection that you have with the ancestors. And I know there was another point that I wanted to make, but I can't remember. So we'll go on, and I'm sure it'll come to me.
Well, and I love that because a lot of times I think we think the work with working with ancestors or w- it's almost like we think it has to be farther back or that it's with your mom only being gone for a year it's too fresh, it's too whatever, and we have to wait longer. Well, that's not true.
Mhm.
You know,
Right.
it the whole event, the whole experience came about when the timing was right, and the clearing and the healing that you received was because the timing was right. It
Hmm.
was complete when it was complete. And I love that. And you can also, like, that ancestor can be blood relative, but it can also be the ancients, or it can be other like regions or areas, or I've always been fascinated with ancient Egypt, so I don't currently have anything on my altar with that, but I can bring that in to be able to tap into some of that energy and keep that focus there. So I love it because it's really, the altar just gets to be so personalized based on you, your interests, your experiences, where you are, what's going on, the healing that you may need. And I really love to just trust the intuition, to like the intuitive little nudge that you got to put those pictures out there. Even though there was resistance and you didn't want to, you felt that and you followed through with that. And because of it, you received some healing. So I think that's
Hmm.
really cool with all of
Yeah.
that too.
Yeah. It was really awesome. So another thing that I love to do is like a morning altar or a a nature altar, and just creating this little space that is not permanent. And you can do it in your house if you want, or you can do it out in nature. And what I did this, was it last year or the year before? I don't
I
know,
think it
but
was the year
for
before.
yeah, for quite a while I was doing it on a regular basis. I was in a class and I learned about morning altars. And there's a book actually, and I can't think of the guy's name. His first name is Day, but I don't remember. But he does these morning altars, and he does beautiful altars, and they're nature altars. He goes out and he forages for flowers. He's in Oregon, I think, and they have beautiful wildflowers and whatever. And so he goes out and forages, and then he makes these beautiful nature altars. And I started doing this as because of school. I was doing just little altars, just kind of going out foraging for the flowers and pieces of nature. And the thing is, when you do that, you go out and you're like, I always took tobacco with me, and I always offered, it was like you only take one or two of whatever it is you're taking, or a minimum of what you're taking, and always leave an offering. Always ask the the tree or whatever, is it okay if I take this, or the flower, or is it okay? And then always leave that little offering. And so takes it a whole nother level, where you're connecting with nature, but then you're also creating these, and they don't have to be elaborate. His are beautiful. I mean, elaborate, beautiful altars. Mine are, sometimes I have a lot of pretty flowers. Sometimes it's a few pine cones. And what I found was, as I was doing those, was I would go out and I would find a little space, and I would clear my little space, and I would put up this little altar, and knowing that it's not permanent. But what it was like the intention. So that day there was an intention of gratitude that I would put in with this, or an intention of um, healing for myself, or healing for the whatever, at the time. And so at that time it was like more of that kind of things. It was like putting little intentions every morning. And then it has evolved to being more of, and now I don't do it every day like I was doing it. I do it when I'm feeling like I need to bring more healing to the land. So I'm going out and I am offering, and these are, I've created, it's more of an offering to the land. It's an altar with intention, but it's an offering to the land. So I bring in, sometimes I have crystals that I feel like need to be there. And I always like to have flowers at our drum making, or our, not our drum make, well, at the drum making, but also at the full moon circles. And so when we have flowers on the altar of the full moon circles, I bring those flowers home and I make an altar as an offering to the land. And not just the land. So it's the fairies, the, the little people, all
The
the
dragon
little
energy.
elemental, the dragons, yeah, the Bigfoot. I mean, all of those, you know, creatures seen and unseen that we don't think about. So that's what this is for. And so I create these little altars now, and it's more about working with the land and offering healing and asking what do I need to be doing and things like that. So
Mhm.
it's kind of evolved that way for me. But these little altars you can do, you know, easily. I know you do them here and there. You'll find places where you're like, oh, I need to make a little altar. And it's something that is not permanent. And like I said, you can do them in your house. If you don't have a place outside where you want to do a little altar, you can bring some pieces of nature in your house, set it up on your um, kitchen table, for a day or something. And it's not, it's not going to be permanent. You can take that away and move it somewhere else.
I
So
love that.
there's,
I definitely I remember when we because you were posting a lot of pictures about that back a
mhm,
couple years ago, and it really
yeah.
inspired me, and I was like, I want to do that too. So we talked a little bit about it, and you explained basically what you explained here. But it is very healing, and that's something that I've noticed with it too is so I love that because I have received healing from it just and I think it is the intention, but it is I think the first one that I did, I just gathered up some pine cones and some fallen leaves that had fallen off from flower or petals from flowers, and I just created it off the side of my house. And I was just so grateful for my home. The my cute, sweet little house that's allowed me to safely raise my boys and all the goodness there. And I physically felt the gratitude as I was arranging these in a cute little
Mhm.
just and it nothing elaborate because 'cause I'm not elaborate in that way. It was very basic, very non-flashy, but it was the intention. I was slowing down. I was purposefully putting a shape together with all of these beautiful gifts of the earth, and I was sending so much gratitude for my little piece of property, for my space where I live, and it was so beautiful, and I felt so much better after I did that, and I even had the intention that, for whoever owns it after me and the gratitude for those who owned it before me and just the whole thing was how I felt. That was my very first experience from that. And
Mhm.
it felt very just very powerful and very beautiful. And there was a beautiful little altar there. And then when I went out there the next morning, it was scattered. And I
Yep.
I really thought of how that is the entire purpose of this is to allow it to not be permanent, and really the mindset behind us as humans is we want to force things to last, right? We want everything to be built to last. We want the monuments, and we want all those things to be significant, and they do have a place, but that's not the place of this. It's to just allow time and allow flow of life and allow things to happen. I've had others that I've put in my yard that have lasted longer, and
Mhm.
either they're both they're both correct. But
Right.
I definitely feel like I needed that little impermanence lesson there too.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one thing that the altars really, when I was doing them on a regular basis, it really helped me to learn to let go, you know. Um, I mean, it's not something that I'm total embodied of, but
But that whole
but
concept of
it,
surrender.
yep, surrendering and letting go of that. Well, for one, yeah, my dog will walk through and I'm just like, you know, or something like that. He doesn't do it anymore. He's just sits and he guards me while I'm putting him up. He's funny, but he used to. He'd be like, he'd walk through it, and I'd be like, ah, you know. And at one point, there was one time I remember he walked through probably 3 times, and each time he walked through, I'm rearranging, trying to fix it what he walked through. After the third time, I was like, okay, lesson learned. I'm leaving it alone. And so that was one of the biggest lessons that I learned from doing those altars, and I just love being able to just create that little piece, that little thing of beauty, and which you know, to me, nature is beautiful anyway, but just having that cute little whatever it turns out to be when I'm done with it and I'm like, oh, this is so cute or whatever, and just allowing it to be, it's not permanent. It's gonna be gone tomorrow, but that's cool. I love it now. So
And I think it's fun when, like you create something, you create a shape, you create this altar, and it's beautiful and it's made out of twigs and sticks and whatever. And I don't know about you, but there's been times where I can just see it and it's so beautiful. And then I try to take a picture of it and it just looks like ground.
yeah.
It just doesn't come through the image. And it's funny to me because I'm like, okay, this is one that's not meant to be shared. It is
Hmm.
just meant for me to see and enjoy while I'm here. And it's even like, nope, we're not going on social media. It's
Yeah.
just for you. It's just for me. And those have a little special personality to me in my mind when that happens, because it's almost, yeah. I mean, it's almost like, no, this is just for you. And you
Yep.
and I have online businesses, so of course we use social media a little
Yeah.
differently than the average person, but
Right.
it's just it's that little conversation back to me where it's like, I don't want
Yeah.
to be on social media. And I'm like, okay, noted.
Yeah.
Thank you for
I've
making
actually had those times too. Yeah. I've had those times too. So
it's fun.
yeah, I love it. And so yeah, that's another way of using an altar is, doing those little impermanent altars. And um yeah, they're probably my favorite.
Hmm.
And I love when we get together and we all create the altar together. So if I bring flowers or if I have everybody bring flowers, then creating that. And we all look at it. It's so fun because we all look at it. Oh, that's so pretty. And it's like, this is so cool. And so that's the other thing that I really love. And what it does for me is I think it helps us to connect in another way.
Hmm.
And so, yeah. So and I think that's all I need to say about altars.
I think so too. I know I was just thinking, is there anything that we could add to this? And I think it feels complete. We've covered a
Yeah.
lot of it.
Yeah, I think so.
Um, yeah, I had another thought come, but I think I'm going to save that for another day.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So with that, would you help us close this container?
Okay. Go ahead and close your eyes. Take another deep breath in. Pull your energy back into your body. Feel the weight of your body in the chair. Feel your feet on the ground. Move your toes, your fingers. Allow yourself to be right here, right now, and just ground into this Listen, go ahead and open your eyes. And my dog decided he needed to bark at something, which he usually doesn't.
He just wanted to let us hear his voice too.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And as always, if this has been a helpful episode, please, I would love to know, do you have an altar? Have you used an altar? Put some info in the comments below. We'd love to be able to hear that. Or if there was something that you took away from this, just share whatever you'd like to share in the comments. We'll be interacting in there with you as well. And share this with others, please. Help us spread the word, help us get the message out. That's best done by you sharing it. And thank you for being here and watching, and we'll see you next time.